Hello everyone. Today in this module we are going to talk about ecosystem functions. In our previous modules we have already studied about the ecosystem concept and structure. So in this module we are going to study how the ecosystem functions. Ecosystems are units of Earth's surface along with the organism and its environment. We will study how the ecosystem functions, taking along its biotic and abiotic components. The learning objective of this module are ecosystem functions introduction, energy flow, universal model of energy flow, food chains and food webs, ecological pyramids and nutrient cycling. The concept of ecosystem function is based on a perspective that focuses on the whole system and the functional roles played by each component within it. However, the normative concept of ecosystem functioning also extends towards societal interests. To exemplify, ecosystem function of a lake ecosystem refers to processes and the causal relations that give rise to an ecological system. The role of organisms within it, the interactions between organisms of different species, overall processing that sustain it, long-term dynamics of different populations, overall biomass of the flow, system of energy flow and nutrients within it, and finally to the services it provides to human beings on other organisms. We can understand the ecosystem by studying the structural and functional attributes of all its living, that is the biotic, and non-living, that is the abiotic components. Closely linked structural and functional attributes are critical for the continued operation of an ecosystem, and their integrated understanding provides a complete conceptualization of the ecosystem dynamics. An ecosystem has a function. Each component plays a specific function, while summed up functions of all components defines ecosystem function on a whole. Importantly, function means showing activity and does not imply that organisms perform purposeful roles in ecosystem level processes. Ecosystem functioning reflects the collective life activities of plants, animals and microbes and the effects that activities like feeding, growing, moving, excreting waste, etc. have on the physical and chemical conditions of their environment. Energy flow. In an ecosystem, there is a continuous interaction between plants, animals and the environment to produce and exchange materials. The energy needed for this cycling of materials comes from the sun. Green plants or producers or autotrophs fix the solar energy into chemical energy. In this stored form, other organisms takes the energy and pass it on further to other organisms. During this process, a reasonable proportion of energy is lost out of the living system. The whole process is called the flow of energy. The functional processes in an ecosystem are closely related to its structure and vice versa. For instance, the flow of energy is based on trophic or food and feed structure of the ecosystem, producers, consumers and decomposers. This slide shows a schematic representation of energy and nutrient movement in ecosystems. Energy flow is unidirectional and non-cyclic, whereas nutrient movement is cyclic. Energy flows from sun to primary producers, to herbivores and then to different levels of carnivores, are generally termed as trophic levels or trophic structure of the ecosystem. An energy flow model or energy flow diagram is a representation of trophic levels linked with each other, showing the inputs and losses of energy incurred during energy transfer at each trophic level. Lindemann first proposed such a model in 1942, assuming that plants and animals can be arranged into trophic levels. and laws of thermodynamics hold for energy transfer from one trophic level to the another. This slide shows an expanded 3-link energy food chain. 1, that is the plants, 2 symbolizes the herbivores, and 3 symbolizes the carnivores, illustrating the relationship between food flow diagrams and energy transfer. The transfer of energy becomes degraded, dispersed, and diminished as the energy within a food chain flows from one trophic level to the other. I stands for input, A stands for assimilation, R stands for respiration, Nu is not utilized, and P is for production, and B is for biomass. Universal model of energy flow. According to Raymond Lindman in 1942, 10% law, during the transfer of energy from one trophic level or structure to another trophic level, only about 10% of energy is utilized. The remaining is lost during transfer, broken down in respiration, or lost to incomplete digestion by higher trophic levels. In a universal model of energy, partitioning in the individual or species population, living structure or biomass is represented as a box. Usable part of the indigested energy, I, is assimilated, A, while unused part is ejected, that is Nu. A large portion of assimilated energy must be respired, R, to provide existence energy to keep the body functioning and repaired. A part of energy can be used for growth and reproduction, P, while a part can be stored, S, to accept further inputs of energy. Energy partitioning between P and R is the vital importance to the individual and species. In this slide, we can see a universal model of energy flow in a generalized ecosystem. In this slide, we can see that I stands for input or indigested energy, Nu is for not utilized energy, A is for assimilated energy, P as in production, B as in respiration, B as a biomass, G stands for growth, S for stored food, and E for excreted energy. Primary producers convert the energy derived from sun into chemical energy in the form of food. This creates two major kinds of energy pools: the living organic matter, that is the plant biomass, and the non-living organic matter, that is the plant detritus. These pools form the base of two major pathways of energy transfers. The biophagic or grazing pathway comprises the injection of living organic matter by herbivores, while the detritus or saprophagic pathway, detritus is consumed by the detritivores or saprovores. Organisms following the biophagic pathway constitute biophagic subsystem, and those that follow saprophagic pathway comprise the decomposition subsystem in an ecosystem. All heterotrophic organisms depending on food produced by autotroph primary producers are called secondary producers, and the organic matter synthesized by them constitute secondary production. We can see in the slide the energy pools and associated pathways of energy transfer. Food chain and food web. A large number of microscopic phytoplanktons and other macrophytes perform the primary job of energy fixation. They, the primary producers, are eaten by herbivores, which are further eaten by carnivores or predators in different ecosystems. This slide shows the flow of energy in a generalized grazing food chain. The transfer of energy fixed by plants through a series of organisms eating one and being eaten by other is called a food chain. A typical example of a food chain can be traced in a grassland ecosystem. The analysis of food webs is important to understand ecosystem dynamics in terms of limited euryphagy and euryphagous primary or secondary consumers. According to Payne in 1980, three types of food webs can be depicted, namely connectedness webs, based on the concept of who eats whom, emphasizing the feeding relationships. Energy flow food webs, where energy flow through the food web is estimated and quantified by the flux of energy between a resource and its consumer. And functional food webs, developed the idea of functional food webs on the basis of impact of species on the structure of the community. The food webs have also been described as sources webs, refers to one or more kinds of organisms that eat them, their predators and so on. Sink webs refer to one or more kinds of organisms, the organisms they eat, their other prey and so on, descending trophic levels. And community webs represents a group of species within a defined area of habitat. This slide shows the interlinked network of food chains and food webs in an ecosystem. Ecological pyramids. There exists a relationship between the numbers, biomass and energy content of the primary producers, first and second order consumers and so on to the top carnivores in an ecosystem. Such relationships represented in diagrammatic ways are referred to as ecological pyramids. Ecological pyramids are of three categories, namely of numbers, of biomass and of energy or productivity. Ecological pyramid of numbers and biomass may be upright, pyramidal, inverted pyramidal or of any other shape, but the pyramid of energy is always upright pyramidal or triangle shaped. Here it is shown the pyramid of numbers in a grassland ecosystem. We can see the base of primary producers, then the primary consumers, then comes the secondary consumers and at the top there is the tertiary consumer. This is the pyramid of numbers. We can see the number keeps on decreasing. Pyramid of numbers is one in which individuals at each of the successive trophic levels are counted per unit area and their numbers are plotted. Pyramid of biomass, in which the total biomass existing at each of the successive trophic level is measured in terms of dry weight or caloric value per unit area and plotted. We can see in the figure pyramid of biomass in a grassland ecosystem. Pyramid of energy or productivity, in which the energy flow per unit time at each successive trophic level is measured and plotted. We can see the pyramid of biomass for various ecosystems. Comparison of pyramid of energy, biomass and number. This slide shows the comparison of ecological pyramids. Pyramid of number compares the number of organisms at each trophic level. Pyramid of biomass compares the mass of biological material at each trophic level. And the pyramid of energy compares the amount of energy passing through each trophic level over a period of time. Nutrient cycling. The two processes proceed concurrently in ecosystems. The unidirectional flow of energy and the cycling of nutrient elements. Life sustenance is not only dependent on energy but also on the availability of key elements important for different life processes. Importantly, flow of energy is unidirectional and non-cyclic, whereas the movement of nutrient element is cyclic. The nature of nutrient cycling process is closely intertwined with the interaction of physical, chemical and biotic factors in an ecosystem. Ecosystems, being open systems, participate in various biochemical processes through a system of inputs and outputs. Broadly, there are two interrelated nutrient budget systems in an ecosystem, namely intra-system cycling of nutrients and extra-system nutrient transfers. The intra-system cycling is concerned with the circulation of nutrients through the biotic and abiotic compartments of an ecosystem. It involves the input and output along the different trophic levels and the exchanges between reservoirs and sediments of an ecosystem. However, the extra-system transfers pertain to the intake and output of the entire ecosystem in relation to other ecosystems. This slide shows a generalized model of intra-system nutrient cycling and extra-system nutrient transfer. The pyramid of energy introduces a very important factor, that is the rate. The rate of energy fixation by green plants regulate the rate of production of organic material from simple inorganic substances in a given area over a given period of time. This rate of energy fixation and consequent increase in produced organic biomass is called primary productivity. Hence, the primary productivity can be defined as the primary fixation of radiant energy by plants in the form of organic substances and subsequent use of fixed energy by herbivores, carnivores and detritivores. Broadly, total amount of energy that is fixed by plants in a unit area in a given period of time is referred as gross primary productivity. A significant part of this energy is released during plant respiration for use in metabolic activities. Hence, net primary productivity is smaller because it is adjusted for energy losses required to support plant respiration and defined as the rate of storage energy in plant tissues when lost due to respiratory utilization by the plants is deducted out of the gross production rate. From producers, a portion of fixed energy gets transferred to heterotrophs that inject living matter, while the remaining is converted to detritus pool to support their heterotrophs that feed on non-living organic matter. Within food webs, a pyramid-shaped structure characterizes ecological productivity. Plants typically account for more than 90% of the total productivity of food web, herbivores most of the rest and carnivores less than 1%. Various factors influence the rate and amount of energy fixation during photosynthesis by the availability of basic chemical components of photosynthesis, diurnals and seasonal changes in physical and biological factors, species diversity in an ecosystem. Because of the differences in the availabilities of different factors, the world's ecosystem differ greatly in the amount of productivity that they sustain. Sustainable ecosystem relies on balance between the resource consumption and production. Unsustainable use of resources feeds back on itself and the ecosystem loses productivity in the long term. To summarize this module, we can say that ecosystem functioning is a part of its biotic and abiotic components. Abiotic components will show how the energy flow takes place inside an ecosystem. The biotic factors, that is the producers, the consumers and the decomposers, help to explain the ecological pyramids and the food chain and the food webs. So, it is very important to understand how the ecosystem functions with the help of its biotic and abiotic components. Thank you.